Welcome to the IT Woodworker Podcast, where we discuss business and IT topics. I also include a woodworking project every once in a while, which is something that helps me keep my sanity in this fast-paced business we work in. If you enjoy the podcast, please like it, subscribe to it, and share it with your friends and colleagues. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to another episode of the IT Woodworker. I'm your host, Chris Kousoulas, and I am joined by my co-host, Katie McCullough. Katie, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona today?
Well, I wish it was sunny, but dealing a little rain. But the good news, Chris, is that means if it's raining out, all I can do is sit inside and start watching sports, which this time of year is just amazing, right? I mean, they got good tennis on, actually. The Indian Wells is going on. Obviously spring training, but the basketball, right? The basketball this time of year is pretty cool.
So in the last 20 minutes, if I'm looking at my clock here, I heard some pretty exciting news out of Wisconsin.
Oh, easy.
I'm really excited.
Honestly,
the only thing that I'm more excited about is that that Aaron Rodgers is going to go out east, and then he's going to come back to Minnesota. I mean, he is following the Brett Favre path. I mean, I am so now he'll be my second favorite Minnesota Vikings quarterback, right behind Brett Favre. I can't tell you how excited I am.
Is that not nuts?
It's absolutely crazy. What do they got? Like does the general manager of the Packers have a brother that works out there for them, or what, for the Jets? I don't get it.
No. All I know is go Jordan Love. I'm all in. Let's do it.
And you know what? I'm never going to watch another football game if he comes in, wins it all in 2 years, and then he is just like the best thing since sliced bread. And I can say I really like Brett Favre. I don't know if I like Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if I ever will like Aaron Rodgers. But maybe I thought that about Brett Favre. It's been 18 years, so we'll see and we'll be on our like 9,000th podcast here, and we'll be talking about how Love is going to the Jets, and I can't believe it. It's incredible.
Yeah, I look forward to that podcast.
Yeah, you and me both. Well, let's get down to some business here, Katie. Let's get down to some business. So today we're going to have a little discussion around building cyber resilience for organizations. And I know you told me I'm not supposed to go out and start, citing different statistics here, but I ran into a couple of statistics and then just a little quote here that I can't really believe them. So when we're talking about building cyber resistance, so, the article I found said, it's estimated that cyber criminals can penetrate 93% of company networks, which to me it doesn't even seem feasible. It just doesn't even seem to make sense. I'm a little thrown off by that one. The next one I saw was there's a ransomware attack every 11 seconds, which that does seem feasible. I mean, there's a lot going on. And then it goes on to talk about Robert Mueller, who was in the FBI, the director of the FBI, and created the cyber division. He kind of said the same thing that I've always, being in construction, that I always heard about flat roofs. There's two kind of flat roofs, ones that leak and ones that are going to leak. And he said, kind of the same thing. There's two kind of companies, ones that have been hacked and ones that are going to be hacked. So first off, I wanted to kind of throw that. Do you really think 93% of all networks could be hacked by cyber criminals? Do you really think that statistic's close?
You know what, Chris? The reality is it is. You look at all the potential vulnerabilities, all the uncontrolled access, all the cloud environments that maybe haven't been quite shored up from a configuration. There's a lot of unintended available access in this world, and these guys are waiting for that. Now, that being said, not everybody has all that interesting information that these guys are going to go after it. Now, they very well could, and just make somebody's life miserable, right? And maybe knowing they'd never get any money or the data's not all that interesting. But yeah, to me, that's spot on. I mean, unless you've got, a workforce that is showing up in depth, that is showing up on your security team day in and day out to do like sophisticated threat hunting, that you've got every security control shored up to the nth degree. And we just see that day after day, right? To your other statistic, about every 11 seconds, keeping in mind, yeah, ransomware event could be, I turned on my personal laptop and I click something in my own personal files, or that's a ransomware event, right? If they encrypt your own personal files, versus, the big guns that we see more in the newspapers,
Pipelines
where
breaking in, or banks being broken into, or
right, absolutely, all the big ones that we see in the news. I mean, and so those ransomware events cross the gamut, right, from those little bitty ones. So every 11 seconds, yeah, that's probably even on the light side. So, so both those statistics, I absolutely feel are real, and it's really a wake up call, and I mean, yeah, it's real.
So, and I guess if I'm looking at it by something that I could understand a little bit better, just because they could crack into those networks, it's just, we talk about layers of security. It's like somebody could break into my house. They could, bust the window, break my house. I got a 115-pound dog. They'll take their arm off. That's the, once they crack that network, our 115-pound dog are those additional tools that you have within your tool belt because it's coming. I mean, that kind of makes more sense to me if I think about it like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that is key, is that with those depth and defense controls, how far can they actually get and what kind of damage they can do. And that's really behind what's this whole basis of resiliency is people are going to get attacked. And at the end of the day, data is one of the most important things that the bad guys are going to go after. So what are you doing to prepare for that moment? How quickly can you restore? Do you know you can get all your data back? Do you care if they've exfiltrated the data? What would that do to your reputation, even if you can restore the data, right? Thinking through all those elements is absolutely necessary, because they can get in. And if you're not being thoughtful about planning, what does that recovery look like? You're going to be doing that for the first time in the heat of the moment, which is a bad time to be doing it. And the reality is, the folks like the SEC are tired of it, and they're saying, and certainly cyber insurers are tired of it too. And so there's discussions about how certainly publicly traded companies have to accrue enough revenue, hold back enough money, that they would have to cover the whole of a ransomware event, which, as we talked and everybody knows, right, the actual ransomware event or the payment for ransomware, or whatever you want to, however you want to slice and dice it, all of it's just little pieces that form this huge mountain of cost, whether it's your reputation, lost sales because now you're showing up in the papers for the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
So, now SEC is starting to ruminate about how do we, if you don't have a good security control set in place, you need to reserve, 2% of your revenue to make sure you can cover that situation.
And it's, nobody wants to see somebody else, sticking their hand in and telling you what you got to do. But we also need to have some sort of, I guess framework's the wrong word, but everybody has to adhere to the same level of controls, so that they can, there's got to be a way to audit. There's got to be a way to look at it. You can't come in at different directions and think, well, yeah, you're pretty secure, and I guess you're pretty secure. You really need to start and build that whole system out, so that you can come in and you can look at different organizations and you can assess them and say, yeah, that this organization's secure and it works. How do you do that? Is the SEC starting that? Is this the beginning of it, or?
Well, yeah, at some level, even, if you look at some of the articles that are out there, it's certainly a little bit of relationship, and certainly the cyber insurers are weighing in on those, because they know the controls they want people to have, right? And guess what? They all align back to those frameworks we've talked about. And the other big business that this is generating, which it's always been a challenge, right? When you talk about, hey, we have this risk to our environment, how much does that really cost you, right? How do you really contextualize the cost of any individual risk to your environment? And so that's becoming big business for various companies working with insurance firms to get that data that now insurance firms have, guess what? That's all they deal in is numerical data and analysis and actuaries to understand. And they've got a lot of real world data on paying out ransomware and what it costs. And so now there's more the ability to really contextualize the cost of those risks. And again, the cost of ransomware. So when you bring kind of all that information together where you're understanding the costs, it's going to happen, right? There are definite security controls that we know if you do these things, you can stop certainly the fast spread or the endemic spread of a ransomware, right? If you're doing things like vulnerability management, if you've got tight access controls, all those will help stop it. But now it's more about, do you have all the backups you think you have? How quickly can you restore, right? All those things become incredibly important in that full security control set. They kind of talk about it is there's the left of boom, right? So everything that could happen before the bad thing happens, there's a lot of focus and investment on that. Great. But now it's the right of boom. The boom happens. And now what are you going to do about it? And so that's this whole concept of resiliency and where, me personally, one of the obviously recent move I made is about that data resiliency. We've seen it with our customers where they get impacted by ransomware. And now it's how quickly can you get the data back up and running? And more importantly, to a clean state, right? An uncompromised state. And so technologies like snapshots are incredibly important because they can help you get you back to a point in time quickly. And obviously the immutability of that data is incredibly important. And that's the big business right now, is keeping data immutable and knowing that you can get that back to different points in time because you don't know, you could have been compromised for months. And you don't want to reintroduce bad data to your environment only to be compromised again, because unfortunately we see that all too often too.
And with a novice like myself, immutable data means if they get that data, they can't do anything with it. Is that correct?
Well, so yeah, there's a lot of terminology in this. So immutable means, so a lot of times what'll happen during a ransomware event is bad guys are in there, bad actors are doing reconnaissance to understand where all your interesting stuff is. And one of the things they look for is your backup data, because the first thing you're going to do when you have a ransomware event is you're going to try to restore from backups, right? Because maybe you don't care that your data got encrypted because you can bring it back. Well, if they focus on getting into your backup system and destroying that, now you can't even restore from backups. Now you're assuring that you got to pay. You got to pay because you can't get your data back. So immutable means it can't be changed once it's written. You can't change it. So they can't encrypt it. It's a point in time data footprint. You can't change it. So they can't encrypt it to make it unreadable by you. So that's what immutable means. It means they can't encrypt it.
Okay, gotcha. Is that something you guys do? Who does this best? What are some of the technologies that people are using?
Of course, Chris. Of course, Panzura does it best. They absolutely do. We could send a whole series on this because it's a combination of the fact Panzura in particular deals with metadata, so it makes speeds and feeds of data very quickly. It's because that's why we're a global file system, but that's not really. It kind of helps with the data resiliency. Don't get me wrong, but then there's this snapshot layer where we're constantly taking snapshots, and that snapshot becomes immutable. You can't encrypt it. And yeah, under full disclosure, we've got several patents about how we're actually doing that. So we do think we're one of the best. And we've proved it out with our customers. Unfortunately, too many times for them because they have had ransomware events, but we've been able to recover very quickly. So it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. There's certainly other products out there. I'm not saying we're the only ones in the world that can do immutable data. There's certainly other companies, other ways to do it.
Mhm.
I'm not going to go into those though, but yeah,
Understood.
I'm not gonna stand on my hill and say we're the only ones that can do immutable data.
Gotcha. So we're talking about cyber resiliency for an organization. You've kind of thrown a whole lot of things out there. So like you like to do, you like to confuse Chris, which isn't, the hardest thing to do. So could we maybe start at a high level when we're talking about that cyber resiliency, and maybe these are kind of the steps we need to go through? Does that seem
Yep.
like a fair way to go?
Yep. So again, when you're talking about data resiliency, it's your ability to recover that data. Well, the only way you can truly know if you can recover your data is to go through testing and scenarios, right? Because again, companies are going to have different scenarios. Maybe the bad actor just targeted one person. That doesn't happen all that often, but they might target just a CEO or somebody that they know has the most valuable data. They have access to the most valuable data. And so if they go to encrypt that data, well, they're only encrypting data that CEO can see, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's going to be different scenarios, but you have to walk through and say, all right, here's the three scenarios we're going to talk through. It's an individual user gets impacted, maybe an important file storage location gets impacted with encryption. Maybe our VMs are encrypted, and so because we deal with a lot of customers' data, the kind of four big scenarios we see is, yeah, you get either a few data, some of the data is encrypted, a lot of your data is encrypted, so there's a range there. You could
Mm-hmm.
always be dealing with a range. There's your VMs could be encrypted, and that requires additional work. Or and the really ugly one is where they get control of your storage bucket behind the scenes, like a cloud storage system,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's where, unfortunately, real data loss can happen. So one, it's back to this incident response concept of talk about what are some likely scenarios, what are some most impactful scenarios to your business, and then really you've got to walk through what that would look like in your environment, right? The things like how are you going to detect it, right? And once your detection starts, what are you going to do to either slow or stop the event from happening?
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you're talking about snapshot technologies, because those snapshots are regularly recurring, one of the tasks you need to consider is changing those snapshots pretty quickly so you're not either overwriting where they're going and you give yourself time to restore. So you got to think through all these subtle actions that you need to take. How are you going to find the damage throughout your whole environment? Then ultimately, how are you getting those files back in place and ensuring they're clean? And then an important step is making sure after you're comfortable with everything, you've cleaned everything up. Like in the case of snapshots, did you change them? And did you remember to change them back once the event is done? And so, and again, to me, it's all about your data, because that's what certainly a ransomware event is going to
Yeah.
be. There, don't get me wrong, there's other events that, bad actors are going to introduce into your environment. But that's certainly very much a focus, and especially when you talk about data resiliency, that's a key area. And it's talking through all those steps from an incident response standpoint on how you're going to address that, and making sure you know all the people that have to be involved, all your potential vendors. But to me, the biggest recommendation is let's maybe turn the conversation from, oh, this ambiguous ransomware event to how are you protecting your data? Do you know how
Mm-hmm.
you're protecting your data? Make it a business conversation versus a security conversation, maybe even.
Okay. So it sounds to me like once you've put your cybersecurity plan in place. You kind of understand you've got your tools out there. The next step is to do the testing. I mean, you kind of said before the boom, after the boom. So you really decide, the resiliency part comes in after the boom, as you said, and then what are we going to do? How does this all play out? Who's the contact tree? Where's the data? How has it been manipulated? Can we bring it back? So it's really, and are those tabletop tests? Is that what they call them, or kind of a security test afterwards? That's the cyber resilience piece of it, the cybersecurity resilience piece.
Yeah, it's a big piece of it. And you can do it multiple ways. Certainly a tabletop is the least intrusive, right? I think you and I are both old enough to remember the SunGuard days where you had to take like a month out of the year to plan all these DR and business continuity tests. And a lot of these products anymore, you can at least do a little more, not intrusive testing, but proof point testing, that how quickly you can get some of your data back. So I would encourage you, at the very least, do a tabletop, but do some of the functional exercises as much as you can, just to truly understand it. Because I guarantee you, when you talk through in a tabletop, you're going to forget some steps had you actually gone through the motion technically that you'll uncover.
Gotcha.
And again, certainly with solutions like we have at Panzura, that's a big part of our ability to help customers do testing like that and prove out the ability to restore data.
It's all about the data.
It's all about the data.
Well, Katie, again, you've given me a great education, so I appreciate it. Now I know how to define immutable, so a little better than I did before. So why don't we take just a quick second, step away, and then we'll come back and wrap it up.
Excellent.
Well, welcome back. So, Katie, thanks again for the education. I really appreciate it. It really sounds like the cyber resiliency piece here is what you said is it's after the boom. So you really want to make sure you're doing your testing to understand exactly what you have to do, the steps that have to be taken to get your system up and running. Time is money, data is money, data is where it's all about. So run those tests, understand how it works, and make sure that you have the ability to get moving forward after the boom. So did I articulate that correctly? Is there anything you'd like to add?
The only thing I'd add is you can't just test it once, right? Your data is constantly changing. Your systems are changing. Certainly quarterly, all right, that's going to be excessive for a lot of people. They're not going to be able to dedicate, but yearly, absolutely, things are going to change. So it's not a one and done, right? You got to constantly learn and understand the changes that are in your environment. So that's the other big thing.
And if it is, quarterly, biannually, yearly, whatever it is, it's going to be less intrusive when you actually have to do it. So
100%. Yep.
Yeah. Excellent. It's a good investment of time. Well, again, I'm excited. Thank you. I can't wait to see how Aaron Rodgers works out on the Jets and then the Vikings. So, I hope we have some more exciting stuff coming the next time we talk, Katie. Thank you.
Absolutely. See you, Chris.
Hey, have a good one.